So welcome back to procurement. So this slide is very important. I've seen test questions to this regard. So remember, you are the buyer as the project manager. So notice on the top, your risk is decreasing. You have the least risk in green at a fixed price, or sometimes called a firm fixed price contract. But notice on the bottom blue arrow, the seller's risk is increasing. So the seller has more risk in a fixed price. They have the least risk in any of the cost reimbursable vehicles. I put time and material in the middle from a risk perspective because one, it's a hybrid of the two. And I assume you as project managers will add a not to exceed clause. Okay, very important slide. So this is more risk for the buyer, less risk for the buyer, and that's us. Now, a fixed price incentive fee contract, here is how it can be laid out on the exam. It will generally give you the target cost of the contract, a price ceiling, which you notice is a little higher, a target fee of $20,000. It could be a percent. It could have been 10% of the target cost. Doesn't matter. In this case, I just spelled it out. And the procurement share ratio, the sharing ratio, it's always buyer and then seller. So it's buyer 80%, seller 20%, right? When you think target fee, you should think the seller's profit. You don't really know what their profit is, but that's what you should think. Now, a couple of things could happen here. One, the seller delivers the scope for less than 200 grand, less than the target price. Yay, then they're actually going to get their fee plus the 20%, right? That's their share in an 80-20 split, 20% of the savings. Now, another option is the cost is over 200 grand. So the seller then will get their 20 grand fee minus 20% of the overage. And the third option, which I don't know if it ever happens, the contract comes in exactly at cost, okay? So in the end, you can use this formula that I explained, the target cost minus actual cost, all of that times the seller share ratio, which is 20% or 0.2 plus their target fee. Okay, feel free to work the math on that before you look at the bottom line answer. You will see that on the exam. Now, another type of contract is a cost plus incentive fee. So this was fixed price incentive fee, cost plus incentive fee. Similar kind of numbers out here, and look at the formula, right? Very much the same. But work through that and make sure you're comfortable with it. Pause the tape at this point and go ahead and work through it. And then I will share with you the answer. Okay. So the answer should have been, now you've started the video again, C, $108,000. Therefore, the answer to this question would be choice C. Okay. Now here's how that point of total assumption works, right? So here is in the black lines, your target cost is 400 grand, and you're willing to pay, the buyer's willing to pay a $40,000 fee. So your overall costs are going to be about $440,000. Now, if the seller comes in right at that, bam, beautiful, everybody wins. If the seller comes in above that, see in red, that means you're going to end up paying them less because of that share ratio. So notice this formula for point of total assumption. It's the ceiling price minus the target price divided by the buyer's share ratio, and all of that plus the target cost. So make sure you memorize that formula and work through some examples. There comes a point that even with a share ratio, at the point of total assumption, the seller now assumes all losses. They assume total assumption. The share ratio is over. The buyer, me, the project manager, and my company, we are not going to pay right? So it can get pretty bad for the seller. Here's kind of a summary of the procurement process then. We have planned procurement management, just kind of a review in the middle of this. Then we're going to conduct procurements, which is going out, and then we're going to manage the procurement. So here's the thing. We're going to plan procurements, but in planning it, we're actually building a lot of the documents and making decisions already, like the make or buy analysis or decision, right? And we're going to go ahead and seek independent cost estimates. Then in conduct for procurements, that's where we take these documents from planned procurement and we have a bidders conference and we advertise to sellers. We collect proposals and evaluate them and then award or sign the contract. And then of course we're going to manage those procurements in the relationship around us, the buyer and seller relationship. So I just thought this is a hard lesson, new for a lot of people. In the middle we would just kind of have a quick summary of what we're doing and where we're at. So continue with planned procurement management. That was all the inputs. Now the tools and techniques. Expert judgment is generally there. Data gathering. I love interviews, but in this case I would do market research. What are other contracts going for? That sort of thing. What skills or requirements are they able to provide? Will it integrate into our systems? And so then I will do my own data analysis with the team and the procurement manager, and that's called a make or buy analysis. And that's actually going to lead to an output here in planning called a make or buy decision. But I'm using this analysis in the tool. And they're same analysis that we talked about early on in the course. Return on investment, internal rate of return, net present value, the benefit cost analysis, etc. Those are conversations from week 1 or the first period, first lessons. Now, then we'll do a source selection analysis. We'll put into the procurement management plan how we're going to, what are our driving factors? Is it least cost? Is it based on qualifications? Is it based on quality plus cost? Is there a sole source out there, right? When I ask for a specific seller, for example, do I have a fixed budget? These are all things I want to work into the procurement plan. And then my outputs, when I plan procurement management, my output is my procurement management plan right here. It's the very first thing. It details how I'm going to conduct the rest of these processes. It also ties into my company's procurement strategy. That's something I would get from the procurement manager. Like what type of contract, fixed price, time and material, cost reimbursable, etc. I would develop already my bid documents, so they were done. And I put these together. I would write out the procurement statement of work, or PSOW. It's probably going to be a subset of my overall project statement of work. I would list my source selection criteria detailed in the plan, and the make or buy decision from the tool called make or buy analysis, right? I would gather some independent cost estimates and put them in my plan. All right. Now, so the procurement management plan has bid documents. Some of the bid documents are a request for information, right? That's just seeking information. It's not really a contract. Who wants to build and what would be your proposal? Would it be like? Then a request for quotation, or RFQ, is when I want to know, I want you to propose make a proposal, but I want it to be cost driven. And a request for proposal is when your proposal is, it's a formal solicitation that's really about the functionality or the statement of work. So you have to decide which of these would be necessary. I commonly use an RFI first, let a lot of vendors contribute, pare it down to maybe 4, do an RFP, pare it down to 2, and run a proof of concept in IT. That's how that would work for me. But so I use those vehicles all the time. Now, there are some additional terms you should know. Feel free to read this slide and memorize them. Incentives, I only highlight ones that I thought were different for me. Incentives, I never really thought about them, but they are seller focused, right? The buyer is focused on the cost, performance, and schedule. Sounds like the iron triangle, doesn't it? And the seller is focused on the incentives. So use those to your advantage and make sure you read the rest of those terms. Then in planned procurement management, we have a non-disclosure agreement. Before you even talk to another company, you want to make sure that each of you signs an NDA that says that whatever information is shared will be kept confidential. That's defendable in a court of law if you can prove it. You might do a teaming arrangement. You, as a company, as a seller, might partner with another seller and create a joint venture, giving you a better chance of success. And you want to be aware of terms and conditions and special provisions, right? That the terms and conditions might use, right? What contract type, what sort of business requirements are there, what's the risk, and you will determine special provisions to accommodate those. We will talk about some of those in terms and conditions here. So the next few slides are just page after page of terms and conditions. I would suggest getting comfortable with all of them. I have highlighted a few that were brand new to me. So I'm only trying to point out you won't know everything, even if you've done contract management. There are a lot of terms and conditions. See how you might use these. Any of them that I highlighted, like agent, I never really thought about an agent before. That term was new to me, but now it means it has a deeper meaning in reflection to a legal concept of agency beyond this course. But an agent is an authorized representative, like the procurement manager. I was not an agent as a program manager. A breach or default is an obligation not met. But notice your response to a breach should be to give someone time to rectify it, right? And send a formal letter. Always send a formal letter. Force majeure, I'd ever heard of that before. It's an act of God. Indemnification is a fancy word for liability. All right, I, as the project manager, have to invoice. That's not something I was familiar with when I first sat down and took the course where you're at today. A material breach, separate from a breach, this one is so large that it may never be possible to complete the work, like if a town is wiped out from a tornado, unfortunately, right? Payments. I'm responsible as a project manager for payments. When they're due, what are the late fees? I've got to have money in the checkbook. And speaking of money, I didn't realize the term retainage means that even when I pay the seller, I'm going to retain 5 or 10%, whatever's negotiated, until the work is complete and the books are closed. You'll want to negotiate that too. Time is of the essence. As a project manager, I love that because it says delivery dates are strictly binding. It's a legal term that the courts will recognize. If this contract is on my critical path, you can bet I want to slide in terms and conditions. Talk to your procurement manager. Slide in time is of the essence and define it. A letter of intent is the only one here that is not an actual contractual vehicle. If I give you a letter of intent, you cannot go to court or to the bank and get a loan to participate in this business. The bank may give you a loan because they like you or that you have good credit, but not based on the letter of intent. It's not a contract. There are also non-competitive procurements. A single source and sole source are popular. A single source is if you have a preferred seller. Sole source is if you have one seller. And know all of those terms and conditions. So next we're going to come back with conduct procurements. This is the second process in procurement management.